Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Cage Cash Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan's MMA Picks. Tonight, we're going to be going through quickly the results from last weekend's UFC Fight Night, Aspinall versus Tybura. And then we'll jump into UFC 291, Porier versus Gaethje II, a great 12-fight card coming up from Salt Lake City this weekend. I'll give you my early looks and predictions, as well as some of the bets that I'm already looking to make. But let's get into it here real quick and keep this video nice, short, and sweet and to the point for all of you. So we'll drop it down below, but if you want to, skip ahead. But quickly, we'll go through some of the results, just calling out some of the big things that we noticed and saw over the past week at UFC Fight Night, Aspinall versus Tybura. So 15 fights. We'll quickly go through each one of them. First, we had Jafel Filio winning by triangle choke, or arm triangle choke, I should say. Barras looked good there at the beginning, came out firing, hurt him to the body, but then was quickly kind of taken down, and Filio was really able to dominate from up top and get that submission. So lost a couple units there on Barras, but it was a tough fight. Filio looks a bit better in terms of the finishing instinct and quality than I think I gave him credit for. Next up, we had Bruna Brazil and Shauna Bannon. Shauna Bannon really just doesn't seem UFC level after that performance. I just don't know that, she has the wrestling game, which I was hoping to see a bit more of from her, right? It was just a lot of, kind of half-hearted trip efforts and other little things against the cage, which might work at a lower level, but I think up in the UFC, it's going to be a tough path to get the fight where she wants it to be. And then, on the feet, she looked all right, but just wasn't throwing with enough power, whereas Brazil was coming back, countering and looking pretty sharp in there. Didn't look great in that third round, started to slow down a little bit, but kind of clearly cruised to a decision there. Next, we had Chris Duncan and Yanash Moose. Chris Duncan looked really nice, I thought. Talked about him, training with Gaethje as of late, up at elevation. Cardio looked really nice, and Ashmouz looked okay. I think it was, the fact that he broke his hand or his arm there pretty quick into that fight pretty much took him out of it. So would have liked to see Chris Duncan get the finish, but Ashmouz is a tough guy. Not surprised to see that one go all 3 rounds. Then we had Ketlin Vieira beat Pannie Kianzad. Pretty boring fight. Vieira just took her down every single round, 1 takedown per round, and was able to control her there for most of the fight. Then we had Mahmoud Muradov and Brian Barberena. Bam Barberena here, continues to look old and a little bit washed up. He's got a certain style of fight that he can bring to people, and is obviously got a good chin and is going to stick in there and is tough. But Muradov really just picked him apart throughout the 3 rounds, dropped him a couple times, as I mentioned, and was able to pick up that win. Then we had Mick Parkin and Jamal Pogues. Both of these guys are pretty high on my radar when it comes to heavyweight prospects. And I thought it was an awesome performance from Mick Parkin this time out. Looked really clean in the boxing and really settled in as the fight went along, right? I think that first round was pretty close and competitive, but we saw Parkin just start to pull away with the boxing, utilizing that jab, right, kind of coming in and out. And look pretty nimble on there for a 265er, right? And is all of that weight and carries it well. So he's going to be somebody I'm looking to keep an eye on as we move forward in his career. Next, we had Joel Alvarez and Mark Diakese. This was a tough one. Largely that headbutt, I think, really did hurt Diakese here. I did have Alvarez that we jumped in on really early and was able to cash that bet. But he was able to get the Darce and a nice finish there. But as I said, I think with Diakese, he looked pretty good and was into it. I think Alvarez was still winning that fight prior to the headbutt, but that definitely had an impact there. Next, we had Johnny Parsons. He got that KO over Danny Roberts, a pretty ugly fight, but Parsons looked good. Danny Roberts is not very high level. Either is Johnny Parsons, but that was one we didn't do too much research and tape study on, and I think that was a good call. Then we had Daniel Marcos beating Davey Grant by split decision. I did have the fight from Marcos as well, so I thought that wasn't a terrible scorecard. But I think I think Davey Grant did exactly what a lot of people were expecting him to, and that's why he was getting a lot of love as a dog, but Marcos was able to go out and still get the job done. Then we had Lerone Murphy and Josh Kulabau. Pretty boring fight, honestly. Back and forth a little bit. Murphy hurt Kulabau the one time. Wasn't able to get the finish, but looked good in there for the fight that it was. I think Kulabau coming in off of a big win last time out. A lot of people were expecting a little bit better performance here. I think there's still a desire within the community to fade Lerone Murphy at 32 years old and still undefeated here, but obviously still has a ways to go before he kind of gets up to that next echelon. We saw him call out, top 15 fighter in his post-fight speech. So I think the big question is, does that come to fruition? And how's Murphy look in that kind of spot? I think there's still going to be maybe that top 15 guy that he could beat, but I think by and large that could be a step too far. So we'll have to see where he ends up next and what we'll want to do in that spot. Then we had Fares Ziam and Jai Herbert. This was the real boring fight between the two of them. We were on Ziam and we were able to cash here. I think Ziam played it exactly how he wanted it to, kind of keeping it at range. And then when they get into the clinch, using his, kind of superior size at the weight class to really dictate where the fight went. So kept it on the feet, looked good there, was able to just kind of pick him apart from range. I don't rate Herbert all that highly overall. I think to me, he's more of a early finish upside against some of these upper level fighters. So that kind of proved itself out here against Ziam, and we'll see what happens next. Man, this next fight, Paul Craig defeats Andre Muniz. Man, I can't catch a break on some of these main card fights lately. Muniz, it was a bad bet just because I trusted him at the price tag to go in and implement his submission grappling, which I think is better than Paul Craig, and instead we saw them just kind of kickbox, and that left Paul Craig with an opportunity to get back into it, and he quickly then kind of found it as Muniz was tiring and was able to get him out of there. We know that finishing instinct from Craig is there. Obviously, that was a worry on my side kind of coming into it, but I thought Muniz was going to be able to find a finish, which did not come to fruition. Then you had Nathan Wood, looked really good against Andre Fili. Fili was, was good in the matchup as well, but I think he kind of performed to the best of what we see Fili in a lot of spots, right? Fights, close fights, but Wood was really able to separate himself just with the volume that he landed, and then also just the damage that he was able to do on top of that. So I really liked what I saw from Wood on that last time out, and we're gonna have to see where he goes. I know he's a big prospect within the organization that somebody they're trying to push. So it's always interesting with these UK-based fighters, right? Like they're so big on getting them on the London cards. I sometimes wonder if that desire to wait for those cards all the time, could hold some of these fighters back, right? Like I'd like to see Wood get right back in there with somebody here before the end of the year. So hopefully we see that happen. Then finally, the co-main in the main event, we had Julija Stoljarenko and Molly McCann. Man, Molly just looked not good in there. We were able to cash the Julija ticket. We got her way early at like plus 280, closed a lot closer, but she really was armbar or bust there. And I was thinking about cashing some of that out just because of that fact, right? And the fact that if she didn't get it in the first round, it was more than likely going to be Molly, being able to work in that boxing and get her out of there as the fight went on. But, Julija was immediately able to get her to play the game with her. And when you do that against somebody who, is kind of this meme finish or bust, like you got to be really confident in your defensive grappling, which time and time again, we've seen that part of Molly McCann's game really abandon her. And that was not a unique circumstance here this week. So Julija Stoljarenko was able to really quiet the crowd before the main event. And then finally, we had Tom Aspinall and Marcin Tybura. Wow, Aspinall looked great. The knee looked good. Came in through that big, hard right kick to start off the fight. Right, I think wanted to test it out from the get go, and that he did, and just looked fast. Looked so much quicker than Tybura in there, and was able to quickly lay on just heavy hands, and Tybura wasn't even able to swing back before he was starting to get hurt and rocked pretty badly, and Aspinall found that finish really quickly right after. So I think an Aspinall earlier prop was probably the way to look at that. So a little disappointed we didn't jump on something there, as obviously I gave Aspinall a lot of credence to win that fight, but admittedly didn't see it probably coming quite as quickly as it did. But overall, it was a really fun 15 fight card. You gotta love the times they get over to London. It was a nice performance. Kind of everybody on the card put on during that midday fight time. Thought the announcers were a bit weak, especially in those prelims. Right, I don't mind Bisping on the call usually, but him and Felder sometimes can get in each other's way, I think, a little bit. Both of them have good thoughts, but they're better as the setup guy than the main punch. And both of them were trying to play that role, I think, a little bit. So it wasn't my favorite fights to listen to. Going back and watching a couple of them, it was a little annoying hearing the commentary as well, but is what it is, and you can't have the perfect crew every time out there, and always good to get a little bit of a mix up on who we get on the mic each week. So yeah, Tom Aspinall beats Marcin Tybura, Stoliarenko beats McCann, and then Wood beats Feely, and then finally Craig beats Muniz, and Ziam beats Herbert. So a fun main card, some interesting spots. All of these fights that are going to come up next for these guys are going to be interesting ones to take a look at. But yeah, with nothing really else to be said on this card, really excited for what Tom Aspinall is going to get next. We're going to have to talk about that next time John's on the show, see what he thought of that performance. But yeah, we're at about the 10-minute mark now, so why don't we jump into this week's card. We've got UFC 291, Porier versus Gaethje II. And what we're going to do now is just quickly go through each of these fights. I'm going to give you some of my early leans and predictions. We've got the lines up here in the background. We'll take a look at where those sit and see if there's anything we might want to jump on here really early in the week and see if we can beat some line movement. So let's get right into it. We've got Matthew Semelsberger and Uros Medic here. I think this is going to be a violent fight between two guys that I'm both pretty high on. Matthew Semelsberger is a tough, athletic UFC fighter. He really leans on that, I think, more than any technical aspect of his game to get the job done. Where I rate Semelsberger pretty low on a UFC scale is his grappling and his takedown defense. We've seen him get taken down a lot in fights before. We've seen him lose time off of his back. The thing is here, I don't think that's what Medic is going to be trying to do. Medic is not a takedown first guy. He's a striker more than anything, right? So I think the way this fight probably plays out is them swinging on the feet early and probably somebody going to sleep early as a result. In my mind, it's Semelsberger's the rightful favorite here. We can take a look at where the line is at. Semelsberger has really shot up here as a pretty big favorite. Was sitting around closer to minus 140 for a while. And he's back up to where he opened at minus 185. So I think that is a pretty reasonable line. I think if you're on the Semelsberger side, it's probably time to jump on because it will get a little bit wider, I imagine. And then we look at the over-unders here. We've got the over 1.5 rounds at minus 155, the under coming back at plus 125. Again, if I were to look at this, my gut would say to start leaning towards that under, because if they do come out smashing, it's bound to find a finish pretty quickly. Medic has yet to be over 1.5 rounds in his UFC career. And then, a thing we've already heard a little bit this week that I think we need to keep in mind is these fights all will be taking place in Salt Lake City, right? And that means elevation. And, we've seen in the past, even that last Usman Edwards fight card, just some weird kind of outlier performances and results coming out of that card. So I think a lot of that can be attributed back to how fighters perform at elevation, right? Especially those that don't have a lot of experience with it or are coming in on short notice. So those are all things we're going to have to pay attention to. Medic is coming in here on short notice, is fighting up a weight class, coming off about a year injury. All signs for me pointing towards Semmelsberger. That's the way I'm going to go as my official pick. And if you're interested, I jump in on that line now because I think it's going to continue to balloon. Next up, though, we've got Priscilla Cachoeira and Miranda Maverick. Not a lot of breakdown on this one. I think it's a pretty binary fight. Cachoeira will have more power, and in women's fighting, that means a lot because it's the finish equity I think is really coming on the Priscilla Cachoeira side here, at least on the feet. Where Maverick's going to want this fight to be is on the ground and on top of Cachoeira, right? We've seen Cachoeira is no good off of her back, whereas Maverick is plus level, especially for the UFC. So yeah, I think the Maverick price tag is super wide here, but it's probably close to being justified. I did actually jump in on Priscilla Cachoeira at plus 300 just about a week ago now. We'll see where this line moves. I'll probably look to cash that out if we see some more movement kind of down towards closing. But the way I'd be playing this one is again towards violence. Honestly, I do like this under 2.5 here at minus 115, and obviously that line's really gotten smashed here from a plus 165 all the way back when it opened just earlier today. So the under here, just because I think Priscilla has a good chance of catching Maverick on the feet if it stays there. And if Maverick gets this fight to the mat, we've seen Cachoeira just does not have high level defense when it comes to off of her back, right? Maverick is not much of a finisher herself, but Cachoeira is pretty killer to be killed. So I could see an under kind of hitting in this matchup. Next up, we've got Jake Matthews and Darius Flowers. This is a fun one. I've watched a little bit of tape on the Darius Flowers side. We'll need to do a little bit more before we place any official bets here this week. But Jake Matthews is coming in as a big favorite, about a minus 300. Part of that is, the UFC experience. Part of that is the fact Flowers is going to be coming in here on short notice. Only a couple days notice, actually. This fight just got made about a week ago. And so Flowers will have, 10 to 14 days here prior to the fight, prior to finding out that he was going to be in this card to going out and fighting Jake Matthews, who's a solid welterweight fighter. I think Flowers does have a lot of good things to write home about, right? And watching his tape, he's a pretty well-rounded fighter. He has some decent wrestling and is able to use that offensively pretty well. Haven't really seen him too much off of his back or that defensive grappling, but I don't think that's something that Matthews is going to try and use too heavily here. We have seen Matthews' wrestling game in the past, and it's not too bad. But I think Flowers, might be able to hang with him pretty well on the ground. Flowers is more of a one-punch knockout kind of guy, just in the sense that, not is he always a first-round finisher, although a lot of his wins are kind of coming by first-round finish. He's just not super active in there until he kind of finds a spot or finds a punch. Now, in some circumstances, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, but against Jake Matthews here, I think that's a pretty tough ask, especially coming in on short notice. So we're seeing this line is kind of starting to close down. I think that's right. But if I'm jumping on the Flower side, it's probably now or it's probably later in, actually it's later in the week at an inside the distance number. I think that's the path to victory here for Flowers in this matchup, especially given that, as this fight starts to get extended, I do see his cardio starting to go on him a little bit. So anything around, a Flowers and under 1.5, maybe a same game parlay or something like that, or Flowers round 1, round 2 by KO. Those could be interesting spots to look at if you're going to look at this dog. If you're going the other way on the Matthews side, I like the round 2, round 3 props, because I think if he's going to have to deal with Flowers, who's going to come out hard there in that first minute, looking for the finish, right? But I think as this fight gets extended, it's going to be Matthews pulling away with it, and ultimately, I think finding that finish. So I am going to go with Jake Matthews here in the matchup, but do like Darius Flowers. Think he is of that UFC caliber, and excited to kind of see what he'll do in the octagon going forward. Next up, though, we've got CJ Vergara and Vinicius Salvador. In this matchup, we're going to look at where the line is now. Yeah, it's Carlos Vergara at minus 156, and I'm a little surprised with the way that this line has kind of continued to, move up and down from that minus 170 price point. I really like Vergara in this spot, and it's somebody I'll probably lay a unit on coming out of this taping. Vergara is a pressure fighter. He's going to get in your face. He's going to use his boxing, use his wrestling, and kind of octagon control, and really just make it a difficult, grimy fight for anybody that he goes up against. We've seen it time and time again. And last time out, we had Salvador taking on Victor Altamirano. Pretty even lined fight, but Altamirano came out and was able to really dominate that fight from start to finish. And I don't see anything different really happening here in this matchup between Vergara and Salvador. I think, Salvador still has a lot of holes in this game. I don't rate him very highly on the feet. I think he doesn't always look all that into it in there. He looks a little full of himself and just not all that focused. So none of the things I want to see as a backer. So in my mind, it's going to be CJ Vergara, favorite or pass in this situation. And yeah, I do like Vergara, and I'm probably going to be a spot that I'm looking to jump on before the week's over. Next up, though, we've got Roman Kopylov and Claudio Ribeiro. This is another one. I don't rate either of these guys all that highly. I think Kopylov last time out against Puna Soriano looked awesome, and I was able to actually cash him as a dog there. A lot of people were on the Puna side, thought he was going to be able to get Kopylov out of there. In fact, it was the other way around, right? Kopylov just broke him over the stretch. The line here is pretty wide. We'll take a look. Minus 225 on the Kopylov side. Comeback is plus 190 on Ribeiro right now. In my mind, if you're playing Ribeiro, you're doing it KO round 1, round 2. I think that's his path to victory here, catching Kopylov with something early. Again, similar to the Jake Matthews-Darius Flowers fight. I think if Kopylov can keep range a little bit in those first couple of minutes and start to extend this fight, by round 2, round 3, Ribeiro is going to be looking for a way out of there, and I think Kopylov finds a way to finish. So again, I like a round 2, round 3 kind of KO look. I do like Kopylov quite a bit in this spot, though, as well. He might be somebody I look to parlay up before this line gets out of hand. But again, you got to be careful because the first round knockout power on the Ribeiro side is a very real threat. So it's something to keep in mind. But I am going to go with Kopylov getting the job done by second or third round KO this weekend. Next up, we've got Officer Trevin Giles taking on Gabriel Bonfim. We saw the Bonfim brother last time out, looking a little full of himself, looked good, but was honestly, kind of given the vet experience there by Benoit Saint Denis. I don't know that Trevin Giles has the same skills to really be able to do that to Gabriel. I think Gabriel is probably the better fighter of the Bonfim brothers to begin with, and I really like his grappling upside in this matchup. And I also think he's a better boxer, right? I think Trevin Giles is a decent fighter everywhere. He's got good boxing, pretty good defensive wrestling, and then offensive wrestling looks always pretty good as well. But I think Bonfim's just a little bit better in all of those spots. So he is somebody that I like. I had him in some early parlays from last week that kind of crashed and burned already. But it might be something that I look to jump back on in a parlay spot. I do, again, expect this line to get a little bit wider. I think that love on Bonfim is going to continue to kind of come in and grow. And I do like him finding the finish as this fight goes on as well. So I like a second or third round Bonfim submission here, but I could see him getting it done with the hands as well, or just cruising past Giles over the 3 rounds. So, the line's probably a little wide, but there's just not a lot that I'm seeing on the Giles side that makes me want to come back and lay money on him either. So next up, though, we've got Derek Lewis and Marcos Rogerio de Lima. Interesting fight here in my mind. Derek Lewis has not looked good the last few times out, whereas Rogerio de Lima definitely has. He beat Waldo Cortez Acosta last time out. I think the really interesting thing to keep in mind, though, that fight had pretty close odds against Waldo Cortez. And now he's coming back against Derek Lewis. I mean, that is a huge step up in competition in my mind. And yes, I mean, Derek Lewis is old and fading and his chin isn't great, but there's still just that death touch that exists within him that nobody else in the UFC has even come close to having, right? So if Rogerio de Lima can implement his boxing, really use the leg kicks to slow down Lewis and hurt him that way, and then kind of beat him over the course of 5 to 10 minutes and get him out of there, I think that's the way he's going to have to do it. Whereas Lewis is going to need to find an early finish here against De Lima, I think, to be able to get the job done. We know he carries his power late, but I don't really see the Derek Lewis who is going to the nothing happens, decisions or split decisions anymore. It seems like he's going in there a little bit faster, maybe to his own detriment. But yeah, in this one, I am actually going to pick Derek Lewis. I think that he's got a lot of good upside here at the plus 145 number. My big question is whether you wait until you jump on Derek Lewis now, or you see if you can get a KO number at like plus 200 or something. I don't know if we're going to get that, so it might be something I'm jumping on earlier. But stand by and make sure you're following along at Ryan's MMA Picks. I'll make sure to tweet it out if I do decide to jump on the Derek Lewis train and get some money down. But from a straight pick perspective, I do like the underdog here in Lewis. I think this might be a little fast of a rise up the ranks here from Marcos Rogerio, even though he's 38 years old, right? That's the thing too. Like, I don't think he is some crazy up and coming prospect that they really need to push that much, they being the UFC, right? So I could see this being a Lewis spot to come back, find one more finish, right? And get one or two more good fights on the card before retirement. If he loses here, though, I do think this is a spot where we could see Derek Lewis hanging up the gloves. So only a few fights left. We'll quickly talk through them. We've got Stephen Thompson and Michel Pereira. Stephen Thompson is coming in at 40 years old, and Michel Pereira, who's been around for a long time here in the UFC, is the 29-year-old fighter coming back on the other side. So 11-year gap in age here, and just at different points in their career. 5-0 in his last 5 for Pereira, whereas Wonder Boy has been fighting that highest level of competition, but has lost 2 out of his last 3 losses to Burns and Muhammad, but comes back and beats Kevin Holland, where Holland breaks his hand in that fight. Thompson continues to look good, though. I think everything about his style of fighting has been able to transition into his later years of his career, right? We know where his strengths are. We know where his weaknesses are. But in a fight like this, where I do expect it to take place on the feet more often than not, I think Pereira does have the opportunity to wrestle here. But we've seen Thompson's get-ups and ability to against lower level wrestlers in the UFC, right, to be able to make sure that doesn't keep him down for too long. We have seen the line close in on Pereira here, Pereira, I should say. And now we're seeing Stephen Thompson down to minus 164. That's an interesting spot in my mind, and something that I might be willing to take a look at playing. I do like the Thompson side in this matchup. I think he's just a little bit more well-rounded on the feet. Pereira probably does have the finishing upside here as well. So, which is something I never really like betting against too much, but I do like Thompson to be able to kind of cruise and keep this fight at range and just be able to do a bit more damage from the outside on Pereira, and be able to get the decision over 15 minutes. So gonna go to the favorite here, gonna fade the steam a little bit on Pereira. I think Thompson, the Wonder Boy, still has one or two more left in that tank. So give me Stephen Thompson here to get the job done by a striking-based decision. Next up, though, we've got Michael Chiesa and Kevin Holland. This is a pretty easy one for me to break down, actually. Chiesa is going to want to use the grappling here from the jump. I expect he'll go in there and look to get this fight to the mat very quickly. Kevin Holland's going to need to try and keep it on the feet, at least from the jump, just because we've seen him kind of taken down and controlled off the mat. Obviously he's a tough guy down there, but it's not always the most defensive savvy defense when he's down there on his back. We've seen him, get in some bad spots against, similar skilled grapplers. So if Chiesa can find his way to the back here, I think he finds his way to get Holland out of there. But I don't think that's going to happen in this matchup. I think Holland's able to stuff a couple takedowns, and as soon as he does, when the fists are flying back at Chiesa, I think Chiesa folds. Chiesa's coming in here at nearly 36 years old, but seems to be very nearly on his way out of the UFC. Right, he's moved into the commentary gig as 0-2 in his last two, and I don't know that there's a bunch left for him unless he's able to go on a run now, right? And I don't know that coming back here against Kevin Holland, the much younger fighter, or at least much younger in his career fighter, is going to be the way to get that done. Obviously, can see the path to victory through the wrestling, but I just don't really favor that to be the case here. This line is closing. We'll see. It might continue to close. And then we're going to see. I'm not willing to lay this number on Holland minus 150, but if it does get a little tighter, that might be something I'm looking to pull the trigger on. You see the under 2.5 at minus 160. Saw some people jump on it real early at like plus money. That was probably the way to play it. I do think this fight ends inside the distance, but at minus 160, I don't know that I'm willing to pay that price at the moment. So I'm going to take Kevin Holland getting this job done by late first round KO after stopping the takedowns and then piecing Chiesa up on the feet. Finally, though, we've got the last three fights of the night. We've got Tony Ferguson taking on Bobby Green. This is a tough one. Bobby Green's going to win this fight in my mind. He should not be a minus 335 favorite, though. The thing is, I can't lay money on El Cucuy in this spot. He's 0-5 in his last 5 UFC fights. And 40 years old, has taken a lot of damage in his last couple of fights, has looked worse and worse each time we've seen him in there. It's just not something that I'm interested in playing here. Bobby Green is going to be my pick. Not really going out on an island there. He's a minus 350 favorite. I won't be touching him from a parlay perspective or anything like that. And we see the over 2.5 kind of continue to push forward. I think that's probably right. I think it does go to decision, but in an area I might be looking at is a Bobby Green KO or something this week, just because we've seen Tony's chin continue to decline. We've seen him from a mental, physical, emotional well-being standpoint, continue to go downhill. And I don't really see anything in his game that's changed or anything in his preparation that's changed that's going to come out here and be able to turn back the clock here. So I like Bobby Green. Don't want to pay this price. So I'll be passing on this fight where the odds are currently at. And then the last two fights, we've got Jan Blachowicz and Alex Pereira. This is going to be a really great fight. Obviously, on the Jan side, we've got the natural light heavyweight. He is the slight favorite here at the moment, coming in out of Poland. And then Alex Poatan Pereira coming in after only about 3 months off since his knockout loss to Israel Adesanya. And, it's going to be a pretty binary matchup in my mind. If Blachowicz can implement wrestling, or if he attempts to implement wrestling, I think he wins this fight pretty convincingly and looks a much nearer to minus 200, maybe even minus 300 favorite than, the line suggests. However, if they come out and just strike, I think Pereira is probably the rightful favorite in the spot. Not to say that Blachowicz is incompetent in the striking here. I think, he is going to probably do a great job of landing those kicks like he always does, right? Finding a way to get himself into range and then try and land, a little bit more close range and make it a little dirty and uglier. Versus Pereira is going to stick to the outside, use that traditional kickboxing style, right? Works in the leg kicks of his own, and then is going to be looking for that, big hook, either coming in around the counter. But Blachowicz is a really great counter striker. I think he's going to be wary of anything Pereira's got coming back his way. But again, I think he needs to implement the wrestling here to really pay off the price tag. So it is probably going to be something by the end of the week. I end up pulling the trigger here on Jan Blachowicz. My question is just where this line's going to go. I think there's a good chance that Pereira flips to become the favorite, just because of the name recognition and all the people who want to get a wager down on Alex. So I've got Jan here. We're gonna see if we can get a plus money number on him. If not, still probably pull the trigger, but gonna wait a little bit further in the week until we see a little bit more action come in. And then finally, we've got the vacant UFC BMF title event. It's a great main event, though, no matter what they are fighting for. We've got Dustin Porier and Justin Gaethje II. I got to be honest, guys. I thought Justin Gaethje, coming into that last fight against Rafael Fiziev, was burnt toast. I thought he was on his way out. He did not look all that good in his fight with Oliveira. I don't know if it's just that in those big pressure fights like that, like he doesn't always show up, which seems silly, right, to say about somebody like Justin Gaethje who almost only has these fights. But the two title opportunities we've seen him have, right, against Khabib and against Charles, really was never even competitive in either of those fights. Really pieced up Fiziev last time out and looked good, landed some huge shots as he always does. But he's going to have the diamond back on the other side to catch these ones. So, the striking is going to be very competitive between these two. I think Gaethje obviously throws with just a little bit more power. I like the versatility of Poirier's game a little bit more. I like the kicks that he's going to throw. And I like the fact that Poirier can probably implement the wrestling and the grappling a little bit more here if he needs to. You go back and watch the first fight between these two. It was very competitive and really a striking-based matchup on both sides. I think Poirier was probably winning the fight, but a close, maybe 2-1 going into that third when he was able to find the finish. The interesting thing there, going back and watching the tape, we saw Gaethje get the point deduction in the third for the eye pokes, and then right at the end of that third round, Poirier got the eye poke himself, or had an eye poke on Gaethje that clearly, did some damage to Gaethje there, and really wasn't picked up on. And then, quickly after that, we saw Gaethje, that eye swell up and close. And then, Poirier was able to land that big shot and get Gaethje out of there. But in this one, I do like the Poirier side. I still think that Poirier, has a run back up towards the title in his midst, and I think this is the fight that's going to get him there. With everything on the line, I trust Poirier just a little bit more for where they are at in their career, what this fight means to them. Obviously, a huge opportunity for both of these guys to remain really the faces of this division, but I do think the winner is going to get their title shot, against whether it is Charles coming back and beating Islam, or maybe against Islam again, Gaethje obviously hasn't had that opportunity, whereas Porier has not either, right? So I think both of these guys are going to really be interested in going out there and putting in a good performance. Both of them, I don't worry about the cardio on the Porier side, even though this fight's going to be at elevation. I still think Porier is going to be around for all 5 rounds and not going anywhere, right? I like this over 2.5 that's currently sitting out there at -120. I do think that's a good bet. My thing is I see this ending somewhere in the late 3rd or 4th or 5th, right? So that's probably the main way I'm going to be playing this, is from a props perspective. But I did want to just note, I do have one of my largest wagers of the calendar year. Not that it's been a good calendar year, so can't advise tailing it. But we're on the Dustin Poirier side, I think at -130 for 4 units. Locked that in nearly a month ago now. Thought we might see a little bit more love for Porier. We'll kind of be interested to see where this line goes throughout the week and what happens as we start to get some props opened up as well. But yeah, I do like Porier here. I think he can find the finish as this fight goes on, and I like him to find another 4th round KO over the highlight, Justin Gaethje, and put Gaethje a step back and make him really work his way back up if he's expecting that shot at the title here before his time runs out. So all in all, really looking forward to this upcoming 12-fight card. We've got UFC 291, Porier versus Gaethje II, and then Jan Blachowicz versus Alex Pereira. Quickly, we'll just recap. I'm going to go with Matthew Semmelsberger by KO. Then we're going to have Miranda Maverick winning the fight. I'm going to say by decision. Jake Matthews and Darius Flowers, I'm going to take Jake Matthews by a late KO. Vergara, I'm going to take by a later KO. Kopylov, also a later KO. Bonfim, I think, finds a submission as this fight goes on. I've got Derek Lewis, the underdog, my underdog pick this week against Marcos Rogerio de Lima, finding the knockout. Stephen Thompson, I think he continues his kind of run of dominance and string of elite level performances at that 40-year age mark and gets the job done against Pereira. Got Kevin Holland against, in my mind, checked out Michael Chiesa. Bobby Green hopefully spares a Tony Ferguson from too bad of a performance, but I got Bobby Green in that one. And then I've got Jan Blachowicz beating Alex Pereira, implementing that wrestling. And then finally, I think it's going to be a bit of a repeat, and we're going to see Dustin Poirier take out Justin Gaethje in the 4th round once again in their second matchup. So looking forward to this one. Make sure to check in later this week. We'll have another video out. John and I will be back together breaking down all of the fights, looking at our bets, looking at DraftKings, and all the different spots on this weekend's great UFC 291, Porier versus Gaethje II. Thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate you guys. Looking to continue building that subscriber count. So if you like the content, make sure to drop us a subscription. Throw us a like on the video. Comment the fight that you're most looking forward to this weekend down below in the comments as well. And we'll see you soon. Thanks. Hope you enjoyed another episode of the Cage Cash Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ryan's MMA Picks, and we'll see you later this week to break down more UFC fights and betting content. Thanks.